The New Orleans Pelicans are reportedly zeroing in on Joe Dumars as their next GM. Could this signal that Zion Williamson could be moved this offseason? We're going to talk a little bit about that, plus other stars that could be moved this offseason. We're also talk about the 4 playoff teams that are the biggest underdogs and have a chance to pull off a first-round upset. We're going to get into all that plus more right after this.
Welcome to the number one place for your daily basketball news and analysis, NBA Central.
What's going on, basketball fans? Welcome to another episode of NBA Central, your number one spot for everything basketball related. I'm the host there, Hayes, but more importantly, you guys can follow the channel at NBA Central Pod on every social media platform we happen to be on. With that said, let's go and get into this content for today, y'all. And reportedly, the Pelicans are really circling around their next GM. A bit of news that we did not cover yesterday is that David Griffin was fired by the New Orleans Pelicans, and I do think that that team does need a new set of eyes on it. The Pelicans have been a team that have been rumored to move off of some of their pieces, be willing to move off of them for years, have started some trades, started shopping people, ended up not pulling the trigger, and sometimes you just need a new set of eyes in there for somebody who's going to be willing to come in and make the right moves and just be willing to make moves and kind of break up some monotony and things that have been going on with the team. And the question that now everybody's asking is that if Joe Dumars is hired as the next GM of the New Orleans Pelicans, does that signal a move by Zion Williamson that they could be moving on if Dumars does replace David Griffin? And that's where it comes down to, right? When you look at the last time that Joe Dumars was with a team was 2019 through 22, when he was the vice president of basketball operations with the Sacramento Kings. He also was their general manager. He's held a lot of positions over the course of his career. We also know that he was the coach of the Pistons at one point in time as well. Right. So with the firing of David Griffin, this does signal that the franchise may realize that it's time for change in there. Right. And reportedly, David Griffin was one of the biggest guys and advocates in keeping Zion Williamson on that team. Right. And so now with a new set of eyes and with Zion Williamson being who he is as a player, talented player, but one that has had a lot of difficulty staying healthy. Right. Could this now signal that the Pelicans are at a crossroad of being more open to making really big changes across their roster, right? They did trade Brandon Ingram at this year's trade deadline, but that was just one of a few moves that people or players that thought that could be open, right? We did hear that just about everybody on that team was on the trading block at one point in time, but like always, the Pelicans kind of started and stopped it and didn't do much with it, right? So now, are they going to explore the trade market for Zion Williamson, and would that be the best thing for that team? That's the question there, right? And it is a conundrum still to be in. When Zion's healthy, he's one of the most dominant players in the NBA, right? But he's not been able to stay healthy throughout his career. That is why one of the reasons that the Pelicans do have a out basically after every year of Zion's contract to where they can get out of that no harm, no foul, right? But of course, wanting to kind of extract any type of benefit from that, right? And value out of that is why they could look to trade Zion instead of moving on from him, right? So with new leadership now expected to be there with New Orleans, it seems like they're going to be keeping Willie Green there, and we'll see what happens there. But overall, now you're looking at what the next step is for this Pelicans team, which gets us to our next topic. Who are some of the most likely stars that could be moved this offseason? Some that we've already talked about, some that we haven't. But let's just go over this list, right? And then we'll finish this off with a little playoff talk, right? First up, Kevin Durant. I think that the writing's on the wall that Kevin Durant is going to be moved, right? When you look at Kevin Durant, he's been part of several, big threes that were supposed to be there. One that won in the Golden State Warriors, one that failed in Brooklyn, and then there's one that came to a crashing halt here in Phoenix, right? And so when it comes down to it, the trio of Devin Booker, Kevin Durant, and Bradley Beal just never was going to work, right? We know that. I said it before that when they decided to make that trade in 2023 for Bradley Beal, it doomed the franchise. And that just is what it is, right? Because they had no real depth. It put them on the path of being over the second tax apron, which we already know is restrictive. And they had no point guard to speak of, right? And weirder things have come out that Mike Budenholzer wanted Bradley Beal to become Drew Holiday and things like that, which is crazy to think of, right? But when it comes down to it, I'm sure the Suns would love to move Bradley Beal and try to find a way to keep it going with Devin Booker and Kevin Durant and just make a more solid makeup of a team. But to me, you're not going to move. We already seen Bradley Beal is not willing to move his no trade clause. And you're going to probably have to make several changes around that team to make it uncomfortable for Bradley Beal for him to even think about it. And part of that is going to be moving Kevin Durant. Reportedly, at the trade deadline, Kevin Durant did not want to be moved. And one of the biggest reasons that was quoted was that he didn't want to move his family in the middle of the season. Not because he was convinced that the Suns could do something crazy with it, not because of anything like that, but because he didn't want to move his kids, which as a father, I completely understand, I support, and I respect wholeheartedly, right? So no problems with that, right? But when it comes down to it, Kevin Durant seems like he's going to be moved at some point in time this trade deadline. And it just comes down to it, right? You got teams like the Houston Rockets that make a lot of sense for him. One of the Texas teams seems like whether it's San Antonio or they could also put together a really big offer. But if they get lottery luck and get Cooper Flag, I doubt that's going to happen. We've heard things with the New York Knicks. But I think it all points to one thing. Kevin Durant is probably going to move this offseason. And to me, that's the right move for the Phoenix Suns. The next player, Devin Booker. Now, the Suns seem a little bit more reluctant to move Devin Booker. And I said in yesterday's episode, with Devin Booker only being 28 years old, being a player that was drafted by the Phoenix Suns, being somebody that he said himself he wants his jersey in the Raptors. I mean, not in the Raptors of the Phoenix Suns, but he wants a statue right outside the arena. And, I understand and respect the loyalty that the ownership group has to Devin Booker. And they're right to have that, right? Like I said, he's a guy that most people want, right? As far as you want to be able to draft a guy that's going to be able to grow, excel under your team, and he's the cornerstone of everything that they do. And I don't think that they should move Devin Booker just for the sake of moving him. When I say that the Suns should be looking to move Devin, because I just don't think that this team is going to pull enough together with their lack of draft picks, with their lack of assets, with their lack of money, with all those things, the lack of trade value even from the players that they could look to move. All of those things to me does not sound like a recipe of a situation where you're going to be able to get something that's going to really put Devin Booker in a spot to really go on playoff runs. Now, maybe I'm mistaken by that. Maybe the Suns pull out a trade that I don't expect, that I don't see on paper happening, and the Suns are right back there looking like they can compete and contend. Maybe that's what happens, and if that happens, great, right? If that happens, amazing, great. Hats off to them for being able to do that if they can pull that all together. But the thing that I'm saying is that I just don't see that. And for the betterment of the future of your franchise, I think that the Phoenix Suns should do what the Utah Jazz did and move both their stars. Move Kevin Durant, move Devin Booker, and then get as many assets back as you can and plan for the future. Now, it's going to be a tough pill to swallow because Devin Booker has such a connection to that city of Phoenix, to that fan base, to that franchise. But sometimes you have to make the tougher decisions. And because of that, I do think that we can look out for a Devin Booker trade being on the horizon sometime this offseason. We'll see if it does happen. Next up is the player that we just talked about. Number 3, Zion Williamson. No porn stars. But with that said, we know what Zion can be, right? But this is 6th straight season now with Zion Williamson having major injury concerns, not just minor injury concerns, major injuries that left him off the court for extended periods of time. And to me, I just have not seen a career in which that turns around enough to where it makes sense to hold on to him. Now, the New Orleans Pelicans sit in a position in a place where they can actually pivot, and they still have a nice base, right? They have a nice base of players. They have some draft picks in there as well. You can get more, of course, with Zion Williamson. There's, of course, questions over how much are you going to get back for Zion with his injury history. But I do think teams, because they do have that out, right? That out is there in his contract to where they can get out of it any summer that they choose to do so. Maybe that makes it to where you can get something back. Maybe not as much back. Maybe you get a little something back, right? There maybe some more protected picks, things like that, whatever happens there. And you look at Zion Williamson's $36 million contract, right? By the last year of it in 2027-28, it's $44 million, right? That's less than like what Zach LaVine's getting paid right now. So, we know that those deals can be moved. And the Pelicans sitting in place where next season they're $18 million beneath the first tax apron, $30 million beneath the second tax apron. So they got money to move, right? They got some money to where they can absorb bad salaries if it means getting more pickbacks, thing like that, right? But one of the things that's unfortunate with this is that the Pelicans' own pick isn't in their control. It just isn't in their control. So, they have a pick swap with Milwaukee. We'll see what happens with that one, right? But overall, this is a period where the Pelicans have an opportunity to move on from Zion and to forge forward with a new path, with going younger and things like that. Yeah, they still got other players on here that are older that absolutely could be looked to be moved. CJ McCollum, I think if you move Zion, you got to move CJ as well. He's 33-year-old. It makes no sense. DeJounte Murray is a player that I think could get you a lot back if you decide to move on from him. You got Eve Missy down there, solid. You got Jordan Hawkins down there, okay, solid. You got Trey Murphy III down there, a player that they reportedly didn't want to come off on. Very solid player. Herb Jones, really good two-way player. Jose Alvarado, solid, right? They got solid players, but they don't really have what you look at and you're like, yeah, this is it. So because of that, I think that Zion definitely should be on the trade block here. I think they got to make that tough decision, and now is the time to pull the plug on this experiment with Zion, and maybe he can go on somewhere else and have a full and fruitful career. But I think now with David Griffin being gone from that Pelicans team, it's going to open up new eyes. I think that's where it's going to be. Now, here's the thing, right? And I always like to point out points against my own thing. Zion's still extremely young. Zion Williamson is, 24 years old? Still has, theoretically, the whole majority of his career ahead of him, right? In his, not even technically entered his physical, what's supposed to be his physical prime yet. Hopefully that's ahead of him. Hopefully with that prime comes a more healthy. But players don't tend to get healthier as they get older, right? It just doesn't seem to happen that often. Not to say that it can't, but it's just not regularly what you see happening with franchises. Zion and the injuries that he's had, the lower body injuries that he's had with his frame and his size and his inability to really regulate his weight either, all those things play a part into Zion just, we'll see what the future holds for Zion Williamson, and I'll leave it at that. The next player on this list that I think that we all need to talk about is Domantas Sabonis, right? And we've heard a lot of trade rumors around Sabonis basically since De'Aaron Fox was moved. Now, the Sacramento Kings have been okay, right? And I think that they've left themselves some leeway, right? In getting Zach LaVine back as part of the 3-team trade that sent De'Aaron Fox to the San Antonio Spurs, it was trying to give them an opportunity to not have to go full rebuild. Now, depending on how they look at what the results have been since that trade deadline move, that's where it comes down to, right? Sabonis has struggles on defense. It's definitely contributed to this Kings team having some trouble finding success in the postseason. Not to blame it all on him, because it's not all on him. And we'll see what this postseason run brings. But I think if this Kings team has a disappointing end to the season and, they go into next season and really look at things and say, you know what, maybe this is the time that we need to pivot. Maybe we need to move off. We try to bring in DeMar. It didn't work. We try to, pair that with De'Aaron Fox. We had to fire our coach. That alienated, De'Aaron Fox, that led us to moving on from him. All these things could all come together and they could say, hey, it's time to go ahead and make a move and do some different things. Now, one could also say they were only one game below 500. In a season where you had some injury concerns, you fired your head coach, you made a major trade, maybe they want to see what this team in this version and this build of the Kings can look like with a full offseason under their belts, and they might want to take a look at that. And, that other franchises have done weirder things around that to see what they can add to this. The Kings salary cap sheet is fairly okay, right? It's not like you're a team that's dangerously over the second tax apron or anything like that. They don't have that to talk about. So maybe they do want to take a look and take another shot at it. But I do think that there is a chance that Sabonis is moved this offseason, and we'll see what the future holds for them. But like I said, they got some cap space, $25 million below the first tax apron this upcoming offseason, which can get them and give them a little bit of flexibility to do some things with if they want to try to add to this team rather than take away. But when you look at the Kings as well and the future of their picks, it could be a time period where they own, after this season, which their pick was top 10 protected to Atlanta, all of their picks, every other pick that they have until 2031 they own all of those picks. And they have an additional first-round pick as well from the Spurs. So because of that, in 2027. So because of that, this could be the year where they look to move to do some things. And if they do, I'm not mad at it. So we'll see what the future does hold for the Kings there. But Sabonis, his time with the Sacramento Kings could be more behind him than in front of him. The last player that I want to talk about on this list, and this is the one that I know a lot of people are going to disagree with, is Trae Young. And, there have been rumors around Trae Young possibly being moved by the Atlanta Hawks for a while. The Atlanta Hawks, who have been lavishing around the play-in tournament for the last 3 years, right? After having a decent run in the playoffs, right? They've not really improved since then. And despite Jalen Johnson, who's a great player that looks like he's really going to be ascending for them, they had the number 1 overall pick last year. They got Dyson Daniels here. I think that this is a team tailor-made to try to go younger and build more organically over time if they can. Now, Trae's fit in pretty well with these players. We know that, right? You look at him again, 11.6 assists per game. He's led the league in assists yet again. That's just what Trae Young does, and there's time with that. But I think when you look at the Atlanta Hawks have to ask themselves, how capped is your ceiling with Trae Young as your best player on your team? And that's what they have to ask themselves. But I do think if they do that evaluation and find it, hey, we can get more assets back. We can continue adding young pieces to the core, taking bites at the apple to find somebody, that this could be an offseason where they look to do so. I think a lot of teams are going to try to make their decision before the summer of 26, where a lot of things kind of free up at, right? So that's what you're looking at there. We'll see what the future holds. But Trae Young is a player that I do think could be moved. Not necessarily saying he will be moved, but I do think he could be on the trade block this offseason. Let me know what you guys think on all that down below. Now, with that said, I want to get into the playoff talk before we get up out of here, right? And I want to talk about teams that have a chance to upset the team that they're playing in the first round of the playoffs. And the first one that I'm going to talk about is the Detroit Pistons. Listen, you can call me crazy if you want to. I've seen Cade Cunningham absolutely hunt out Jalen Brunson when they face off against the Knicks. And here's the thing. I trust the Detroit Pistons defense more than I trust the Knicks, right? And the question that you have to ask yourself there, is this going to be a star-making playoff run by Cade Cunningham? I think that the Detroit Pistons absolutely have a chance to upset the New York Knicks in the first round of these playoffs. And listen, if you even call it that, the Knicks with their struggles against teams above 500, their struggles on the defensive side of the ball, despite Thibodeau being their coach, I think that the Knicks are really set up to be a team that can get upset in the first round of the playoffs. And I think that you got to really look out for them. They're huge underdogs, and I think that they definitely have a chance, and they're the first one that I look at as a team. And again, as a Bulls fan, me saying this much about the Pistons hopefully proves to y'all how objective I can be about basketball, because the Pistons absolutely have a chance to upset whoever they're against against the Knicks. We know that they're against the Knicks, but they have a huge chance to upset the Knicks. The next team, the Golden State Warriors. Now, the Golden State Warriors, who a lot of people have said and talked about how they have not had the most playing success. And that's true. This is a different make of the team. And you have two players in Steph and Jimmy who have absolutely had amazing playoff runs, right? And Jimmy's used to being in the play-in, right? Like, we've seen it happen multiple times for Jimmy. So I do think that the Golden State Warriors, if they can make it out the play-in, which, like I said, I'm admitting, it's a big if, right? We can't say for sure that the Warriors will, but if they do make it out the play-in, I do give them a chance to upset whoever they face in the first round of the playoff, if that's the case, right? It just comes down to, if the Golden State Warriors beat this Memphis Grizzlies team and doesn't have to play, they'll be the 7th seed, which means that they're taking on the Houston Rockets, and that is a matchup that I would love to see, and that I think they definitely have a chance to upset that Houston Rockets team because of their experience, but I think that's going to be an extremely fun playoff series no matter what there. The next one, the Indiana Pacers. I think that the Pacers can upset the Bucks. Now, one could say that the Pacers are the higher seed, so could you really call that an upset? And here's the thing, with the way that the Pacers season shook out, they got on more towards the end of the season, which is really good for them. Hats off to them for what they were able to do and play over the second half of the season. But I think that the Indiana Pacers can beat the Milwaukee Bucks. I think that the Pacers' best lineup is probably better than what the Milwaukee Bucks can have. But then you got to ask yourself, how consistent is the Milwaukee Bucks defense going to be? That's the biggest question here. And I look at that. But I got the Indiana Pacers here in the first round. The last one, the Clippers. I think that the Clippers are going to beat the Denver Nuggets. And I think that's mainly going to be because Kawhi Leonard's healthy and the Denver Nuggets just aren't healthy. Yes, they have the best player in this series in Nikola Jokic, who's probably the best basketball player in the world, right? But unfortunately, it takes more than just one player to win in the playoffs. And because it's the 4-5 matchup, because of the way that the Clippers have been playing here on the back half of the season, hell, how they played throughout the season, even when Kawhi was not healthy. If Kawhi is healthy and Jamal Murray is not, I trust that they can get past. And even if Jamal Murray is, which there's already doubt he's going to be fully healthy in the first in this playoff run, the Los Angeles Clippers, I got them beating the Denver Nuggets. That's just my thought process. That's what I feel. But I would love to hear from you guys. Who are the biggest underdogs in this playoff, and who do you can see having a first round upset? Let me know that down below. Make sure you guys are following us at NBA Central Pod. You can send us any feedback, questions, comments, concerns, NBA Central Show @gmail.com. And then lastly, if you want to leave a text message and our voicemail for the mailbag, the number to do so, 773-270-2799. We're the number one spot for everything basketball related, but that's thanks to you lovely and beautiful people. And like I like to end every episode on, see you guys the next time I feel like making a video, probably tomorrow. Peace, y'all.
This has been a presentation of the Breaks Media.